Good morning, everyone. Thank you for tuning in for another episode of Bout Cypher. Uh, I did a whole introduction on mute, silly me. But we're here now. So today we have a special episode. Today we have our. I'm joined by my co-host Lee and a very special guest today. We have our Black IT Academy's resident Onk on the line. So Uh, today's show, we're gonna go ahead and talk about Bash, give some overview, some background, talk about different applications, and just kind of show some different things and see how it all goes. For those of you who have noticed, we are without our fellow host Marie, who is out celebrating her birthday. So for those who are tuning in, shout out a happy birthday to her, and uh, let's go ahead and turn up for it, right? All right. So moving along here, let's go ahead and start off with some breakdowns. Where do you want to start?
We can start wherever, but yeah, I just wanted to hop into Bash, give folks an overview of some of the features. I don't use Bash often for cybersecurity purposes. I have done some sysadmin work in the past and had to deal with um, securing servers and things of that nature, but active mitigations and stuff a bit outside of my purview, but Bash is kind of your lifeblood of a lot of IT roles. So, just a quick history of the shells. Of course, when we're talking Bash, we're talking about Linux, and we're talking about an interface for Linux. So, how crucial is Linux in your day to day, guys?
It really depends on like the environment you support, right? Um, so most corporate organizations are heavily Windows based as far as the internal network stuff goes. Public facing stuff, anybody who's been in IT knows that if you're gonna run a service that you want to be stable and you want to keep running, you don't put it on Windows IIS, right? So you typically have all your public facing stuff on Linux, and a lot of the cloud facing infrastructure is also like Unix based as well. So
Mhm.
if you are going to be doing like web application security, or even looking through logs for specific applications that are out there, it typically has some Unix background to it. One example I use in my day to day is it's not necessarily super bash, but in CrowdStrike they have a function called RTR, which is essentially allows us to remote into any host that is running CrowdStrike, and
Mhm.
from there we get a command line interface where you can do some bash like commands even though it's a Windows host. Like we can list the directories, you
Mhm.
can cat files, and you
So
can
you're
run
using
certain
the
scripts.
sort of commands in this RTR.
Was that?
You're using like ls and the Linux sort of commands.
Yep, yep. Even
Ah,
even i- even if it is a Windows machine, so it still
mhm.
allows us to interact with those with that file system as if it was Linux. And yeah, it's all command line, so you don't get to see the GUI or anything. So it's
Mhm.
pretty important to know at least the basics to know how to get around, right? You don't have all of the Linux applications, but you got to at least be able to be familiar enough with the terminal to kind of go up and down and know what you're
Exactly.
looking for. Especially when you're like trying to see, okay, what this file looks weird. What is it? Okay, I found the file, cat the file. Yeah, this looks pretty nasty. Let's go ahead and just contain the host and keep it moving. Lee, what about you?
Linux, yeah, is mostly the infrastructure that a lot of organizations use for its endpoints and cloud infrastructure things, also based off of Linux. So for the Bash portion of the Linux, I would say me personally is more done through a SIM or a log aggregator mostly. But if you're going to log in on individual hosts to do, one-off investigations, certain commands such as listening and established TCP connections can be found in the terminal uh, using like simple commands like the SS command. You can see all the sockets that's been connected. So that's like one of the initial ways that people like to get access into systems is having a basically a pivoting system that they connect to. They can establish persistence on, and I always had that C2 channel with the established connection socket. So it's like basically important to always baseline your systems and what are established connections you should have from systems. So when you see processes running on, unusual ports, that's when you can start, terminating those processes, doing some deeper investigation. So Bash come in handy for things like that. I'm also doing a lot of system automation work. So being able to use Bash to make, create configuration files, maybe, right? Some vendor documentation may have you create some configuration files for their product to work, and Bash comes in handy for making if you need 12 files with different settings in them. You can use Bash to try to help you automate some of that process. Uh, just things like that mostly for me.
Yeah, I talked to one of my buddies. He's a security engineer. Well, former security engineer. Now he does like MSP. No, he does sales. He does sales now, so he makes the big money. But one of the things we talked about is even something as simple as like certificate management. Like certificate management in Windows sucks. It is complicated. It's weird. It's goofy, and it's so much easier in Linux to be able to just even use certutil to manage certificates and get them updated and get those functioning right. And a certificate, for those who are unaware, it provides the authenticity of that server's credentials to ensure that it is who it says it is, right? So typically you have to add these certificates to machines so that um, it provides authenticity that you're communicating with the right server, right? And it's not someone else trying to pose as that host name. So pretty pretty different things. It's from my perspective, Bash and just interacting with Unix systems. It's like it's like the old school way of like understanding computing, right? Windows does a lot of the stuff in the GUI that hides a lot of that stuff in the background, but as far as like actually understanding computing, understanding how those file systems get navigated, it's all command line on the back end. Just Windows does a really good job of hiding that stuff in front of a GUI so that you push a button, but it runs commands in the background, right? So having to do everything via the command line kind of gives you a bigger appreciation. And Windows has recently kind of gone back to some of that with PowerShell, right? That's their equivalent to the response because as a system administrator, you know, using GUI is nice as a user and you can do some things, but as you start scaling out where, okay, I need to push this out to 100 machines and it is resolved into like opening 4 different windows in 7 clicks, like you do that times 100, and like you spend all your day doing one thing. So
Right.
um,
So you got to get
PowerShell
into the
definitely was
scripting.
built for that to kind of meet that need.
Yeah, yeah. Jaleel, there's a question in the chat. Um, this isn't specifically WSL, but WSL is going to be compatible with the things that we're talking about today. Um, in my day to day, Linux basically pretty critical. Most most coding resources. I'm generally a coder, but most coding resources are geared towards a Linux-based setup. Um, There are equivalent Windows tools, but yeah, pretty much everyone I know is going to have a Linux-based setup. So much so that even on a Windows machine, we'll set up WSL, which is the Windows subsystem over Linux or something like that, which basically gives you Ubuntu or whatever within Windows, so that you have basically native uh, interface into Windows through a Linux system, or at least a Linux-like system. WSL, if Linux is so important, I'm gonna install WSL if they give me a Windows machine. Um, Also, alternatively, what I did in the past before WSL was to work through a virtual machine, VirtualBox, or one of those types of systems, and then just run a virtual machine inside my Windows so that I could still have Linux. Uh, I really have little use for Windows in my day to day. There are there's some decent tooling in Windows as far as the coding interfaces, the IDEs. But aside from that, it's not super useful to have Windows. But so yeah, but I've done a lot over my career. I've had to approach Bash or the Linux shells from a lot of different perspectives, whether as a sysadmin, a database administrator, or even troubleshooting different problems that could be caused by cybersecurity threats, denial of service. Actually, did have to deal with a hacker one time. Um, they had used a, a 0 day attack on on a solar server we had. For some reason, it was open to the public. So they gained access to our network, but the only thing they did was put a crypto miner on that database. Yeah, they could have gone nuts because they got into our network at that point. But yeah, they just put a crypto miner. So we were just wondering why our databases were so slow. But yeah, the crypto miner was sucking up all the CPUs. So whatever.
And that's a good
Crazy thing is
call
that
out
was
there.
a cybersecurity company.
I mean, that's a good call out there, right? Because we you kind of hear about cybersecurity and it's like, oh, we gotta stop the bad guys, but like just like regular crime, like everybody's motivation is gonna be different, right? There's gonna
Mhm.
be, you know, the criminals who are just out there to take money, right? And you got the typical like exploitation, ransomware attack to try and like coerce someone to pay you money, and then you have like the North Korea type of campaign that's going on right now, where they just want money. They want to they are going to implant as many fake employees as possible and get them U.S. dollars and send them back to their supreme leader. And that's their motivation, right? Other groups are going to have different motivations. Like it might be activist related, or that it's personal. Like we want to embarrass this entity or we want to expose this entity. So you know part of part of being in security is kind of understanding what type of threats you might face, right? If there's a ongoing lawsuit or some sort of like whistleblower type of thing, you might, depending on your industry, you might attract certain kinds of people who want to like take revenge in your company.
Mhm.
um there a lot of times it's sometimes there's insider threats where you may be working in a manufacturing company and they just want to take company secrets with them, right? We saw that with that worker with on X who took Grok's all the Grok, essentially the entire code base for Grok, and went over to OpenAI and just kind of like chucked the deuces. It was like, who allowed that to happen? How, like, how do you how
Well,
How
You
could
really
you just
can't.
let that happen?
You can't really stop it. I've worked for Fortune 500 companies in the past almost 10 years now. None of them could have stopped me if I wanted to steal all of their code. Not a single one.
It's yeah, I mean, and you're not like it's we have to be real ourselves. Like we're not going to stop everything, right? But
Right.
you're going to want to at least limit the opportunities for someone and make it difficult for them to do so,
Oh, they,
right?
they made it difficult, but no one can actually. I mean, we're coders, so I mean, we know ways around the system. Like all of the laptops, um, they block US. They're putting in flash drives.
Hmm.
They have network scanners that will detect if you are trying to download or actually upload the code to some weird place, Dropbox or whatever, um, iCloud. So they put protections in place, but there's no way to actually stop. The simplest thing I could do is um, uh, hook up a video output to the laptop or something, like I'm
Hmm.
casting into another external screen, and it could be a screen recorder, and I just scroll through the code, and now I've got a screen recording of all the code. That's almost impossible to stop. That's the analog hole exploit, uh, which is basically one of the one of the impossible to resolve uh, attacks. So the analog hole.
And
If
this is
it,
where we do the surprise, like, hey, you have a meeting with HR, like, okay, maybe it's a merit increase. Nah, your computer's been locked out. Thanks for your services.
that,
Your computer's been quarantined now.
right. But yeah, I mean, some of this stuff is undetectable, like the analog hole attacks. There's nothing you could do because you have to let people see the code, and if a human can see it, then a screen recorder can see it. So, or I could just have a camera pointing at the screen that's not connected to anything in the corporate hardware.
Yep.
I can't control that. One way to get around international or location restrictions. A lot of military contractors and banks have rules about not taking their hardware out of the country. But one way to get around that, you can go out of the country, but you set up a KVM on your system. It's going to screencast you whatever's on the screen. It's going to give you a virtual mouse and keyboard that you can control remotely. So you can just log into the KVM system, and boom, you can control that. You can have that computer set up in your house or whatever back in the States, but you can be anywhere in the world controlling it, and
Yeah.
it's completely undetectable. Um,
Yeah. For that side of stuff, like you'd have to literally know. I mean, it's the amount of work it takes, and companies are not perfect, right? I mean, if something like this happens, there's going to be an investigation, and they might try and adjust new policies to trying to limit that. Like, hey, we saw Unc logging in from China on his mobile
well,
phone,
that's
but
the thing. You're not logging into the corporate equipment. You're logging into your own personal equipment, the KVM,
right. But I
and
mean, most people have like email on their phone. So the email will send an authentication saying, "Hey, we sent a refresh authentication token from this new country. Like, why is he refreshing from this place again?" And you hope that your analyst knows that you're out of town or you're not supposed to be logging in, but it's so much soft information that I mean, when you get down to a company with thousands of people, like you're just not gonna know. You just better hope that all right, this
right.
person's a high risk, and we've now created a process to know like, nah, you see this activity, we got to shut it down, right? And a lot of people don't go through that extent because it's disruptive to the business.
Right. Most companies, they have these rules, but they don't actually enforce them. They don't. they don't really care. But yeah, some of the
right?
stuff like if I'm in China and I'm remoting into my KVM, like I'm still using the the corporate equipment that's located in the states. So so yeah, everything's reading normally. The only difference is my physical body is somewhere else, but the systems that are controlling the computer, the mouse, the keyboard, and the output to a screen,
Hmm.
um, those are being controlled from somewhere else, but that's undetectable because it's just a mouse connecting
Right.
to the laptop. So unless they want to ban plugging in mice, then there's nothing really that they can detect. There's nothing to go off of. So some of this stuff, yeah, is just completely undetectable. Which, um, yeah, like you said, no company's going to be perfect. There's no way to be perfect in a lot of areas, but yeah, it, some of this stuff like stealing all the Grok code, that's kind of stuff's gonna happen. But a lot of the stuff that needs to be stopped, like the cybersecurity hack on what was the Caesar's Palace and whatever in
Oh
Vegas.
yeah.
Like what they got like $30 million off of that ransomware attack. Um,
Insane.
so yeah, apparently all they did was they looked up somebody's information on Facebook and LinkedIn, one of the employees, one of the coders, and then they called help desk and said, "Hey, I'm this guy. I just need a password reset." And they gave him a password for the guy's account, and that's all he needed to do to get logged in. So yeah,
It's
stuff like that you can stop, and you definitely should stop.
we're seeing, and lately there's been an uptick on like malwareless attacks, right? Because RMMs, like remote management software, like what's the I'm trying to think of the so like log me in has like been a really big one, and you'll have attackers posing as IT saying, hey, I need you to click on this link and need to look at something on your computer. I mean, it's literally like the reverse Microsoft thing, right? Where um, instead of having you click on a link and it's does installs their stuff, they're posing as IT and using legitimate tools. And some environments may use Log Me In or some other like small scale remote management tool, and it provides legitimacy because the users don't know any better. Like, oh, okay, IT needs to log in on my machine. Like, sure, like they kind of take advantage of that trust. So that's also kind of been
Well,
on the rise.
that's the issue. Like you got to be certain of who you're talking to. Like if you get a pop up on a website that says, call this number, that could be a problem. Although I did hear of some weird attack from a guy calling Delta. He actually called the legit Delta helpline and somehow ended up with a scammer that took like $13,000 or something. So, yeah, even anytime you're giving out your financial information, yeah, you got to be careful. These days, though, with the zero liability credit cards, I mean, you definitely should be relying. Everyone should be relying heavily on those whenever you're giving out information to they called you, whatever. That way, you just call up to your credit card company. Boom. Hey, I don't know what the heck this is. This is a scam. And most of these companies will do an instant refund of your credit and then do their investigation. Way better than either bank cards or debit cards or stuff like that, where they want to do that investigation first and then maybe you might get your money back.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the geo spoofing, there are different ways to do geo spoofing. Um, uh,
It's
uh,
gotten a little bit harder. I
yeah,
think some especially a lot of organizations have found better ways to detecting VPNs and certain like VPN clients. Like they kind of know like, ah, this is a VPN traffic. We can block certain providers, right? So
Right.
they've gotten a little bit better at that. It's
Yeah.
still doable, but it's been typically when you start doing stuff like that, you kind of hope that there's enough anomaly based activity that you start suspecting something weird is happening, right?
Right. A lot of companies will block VPNs, but then again, a lot of them don't. So
Yep.
that's generally your easiest way. That's the way I generally work. Is to have a network that's on a VPN before I connect any corporate equipment. Even when I'm in the States, I'll have a setup like that, just running off a VPN. It's rare that I run into companies that do restrict logins through VPNs, but I have worked with one or two in the past.
Yeah, and
Um,
it's not necessarily like blocking VPN in general, but like certain providers like PIA uses their own VPN client. DigitalOcean has their own VPN client that nobody like no security software seems to like. So it's like why is this person logging in from a DigitalOcean IP address? Like now we're gonna go ahead and just block that, right? Because it's
that,
not it's not a company sanctioned VPN, and it might be somebody's phone, but like okay, if it's your phone, then yeah, you're not gonna log into corporate resources because that opens the door for you to use other ways to get in. So yeah, it's definitely more about identifying the IP address ranges for those providers and just blocking those connections rather than blocking VPN as a whole. Lee, what are your experiences with that?
With VPN logins,
mhm.
uh, main the environments I work in don't have any external connections anyway, so none of that would even be allowed. But I have worked at a bank that had, remote users logging in through VPN, but it was only allowed from the VPN provider or client that we had was, I think it was Cisco AnyConnect back at the time. And within that VPN, I think there are settings you can allocate for uh, like whitelisting certain subnet ranges that the VPN had to only allow connections in if the provider match along with the subnet range that is only provided when it's allocated through that VPN service. So that's how they, manage that aspect of it. And I know, especially with things like sports betting apps, right? I know they got to probably
Yep.
deal with that a lot with blocking because they got certain states where they don't allow sports betting with certain applications, and some people try to get around it through random VPNs, and it'll tell you instantly, hey, yeah, VPN detected, turn it off to actually verify your real location.
And they got really good at that too.
Yeah,
'Cause I was using that when I was when before it became legal in Arizona. It was just I knew lots of people who were doing it, and it was yeah they put a stop to that real quick. So definitely definitely technology has gotten better and organizations have gotten better at identifying those things.
yeah.
Moving on
Cool.
though.
Yeah, man.
uh
So I wanted to go over a little bit of the history of Linux shells. Um, so back in the 70s, I think we got the first popular Linux shell, which was Bourne shell. It's actually still available in a lot of distributions of Linux, especially the sort of compact distributions like I believe Alpine Linux. A lot of the ones that you'll get on Docker will still have the old board shell. It's a pretty no frills interface, text interface into Linux. Um, you you don't have a lot of the same features and commands that will be available, but often you can just install whatever extra stuff you do need. Um, after
so
that, we go ahead.
So, question about that. Like, so from a Linux perspective, we hear this thing about multiple distributions and
Mhm.
various versions, right? When it comes to Windows, if you're not using the latest and greatest, you're asking for trouble, right? Because Windows typically favors backwards compatibility. They they typically try and preserve certain features, but if you're caught using a Windows XP machine, you're asking for trouble because it's no longer patched, no longer supported.
Mhm.
How does that how does that also look with these other Linux distributions? Do they share a lot of those same concerns, or are these
Yeah,
also maintained independently?
I mean,
Well,
what I've seen in different environments, Linux is not no exception for being stuck on an old version. There are still people using Rail 5 and 6 out there. So it's mostly depending on uh, the software that's being built on it. Apparently, when you have really particular software for particular systems that do a particular mission, developers are very limited in their resources or the cost of upgrading. Literally, I've seen estimates from trying to get off of Rail 6 to a Rail 9 costing over $1 million just to support that. So companies don't want to pay for that, right? So they just stick with the old things that's working and try to mitigate it best way they can with other security controls. So yeah, Linux is sadly not no exception to being stuck on old versions in companies these days.
yeah, with a lot of the upgraded versions of the Linux distributions, say Ubuntu, for example, um, generally what you're getting is an upgrade in the tooling. Um, some of it will be security patches, which you can do separately, but that, for the most part, when you're talking upgrades, they're not critical core system upgrades for the most part. Uh, it's generally a lot around the tooling, and maybe optimizations of speed. Um, as far as, yeah, you can handle all the security patching pretty separately, and usually there's not a whole lot of components that need to be upgraded to deal with security. There's usually probably like three or four that you get with a security patch. So you can run a super old version of Linux and then just apply a lot of the security patches, and often that'll work. But unfortunately, sometimes you do get into some dependencies that would force you to need certain tools that you might as well just upgrade the whole operating system to get those new versions of the tools. But usually, you can get by in Linux on some very old systems. In Linux world, it's kind of been the opposite, where the older an application is, the more reliable it is or trustworthy it is for people. It's a lot of the newer versions that would cause more problems to people than using something older. So Linux tends to be slower to adopt newer versions of a lot of the applications, except around some of the critical stuff like OpenSSL. Usually those are security patches. One second.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm like I've seen a few Tomcat like updates, and uh, Debian is another one that's another Linux distribution. But when it comes to hosting some web servers, I've seen where instead of updating to the next version, you just got to redeploy the machine with a new OS and migrate it over. So it does happen, but it is far less disruptive and more stable than Windows going from 2016 to 2020, whatever. What's the next version? I mean, it's server tends to upgrade every 4 years or so. So you go 16 to 20, 20 to 24.
No,
Um,
it's at 25 now.
was that 25 now? Okay.
So it was 16, 19, 22. So I think it's 3 year increments.
I believe
Yep.
Ubuntu has a 2-year release cycle, although every 4 years, I believe, are the major upgrades. Um, but like I said, you could be running Ubuntu. They're up to like 25 now or something like that. You could be running probably version 16 and really just be fine. Um, like I said, you would want to upgrade a few of the security related programs, but aside from that, everything else, there tends to be a lot of heavy backwards compatibility with almost all of the Linux tools. They make sure that the new versions can do all the same things that the old versions used to do. So whether you're running the old versions or the new versions, all of your scripts and everything's generally are going to still work fine. Um, there's been a few exceptions to that, but not very many. So yeah, we had the Bourne shell in the 70s. Um, we had a couple of shells come out a little bit after that. C shell was a semi-popular one. People actually still use it occasionally now. Um, and then um eventually, I think in the 90s, we got Bash, which is the Born Again shell. Um, the this
Hallelujah.
yeah came with a tool set that really just works extremely well, to the point where it is it is the preference, even though it's not necessarily going to be available in a lot of Linux distributions, which means that bash based scripts may not work in all of the systems that you might encounter. So you may deploy it in one system that supports a certain web application or whatever. You might have scripts that you're using to deploy stuff there. But then you run into um, a different web app that's running on a slightly different Linux distribution, and then your bash script fails because it doesn't have bash and it doesn't have a lot of the commands that come with bash. So you do have to kind of be careful. Bash is super useful, but there are distributions that do not have bash, and your scripts end up failing because you relied on commands that are largely exclusive to bash. So you kind of have to check um, what's called POSIX compatibility. If you want the most widely compatible kind of scripts, if you're writing a lot of these Linux shell scripts, you'll want to stick to the POSIX compatible commands. Um, these would be commands that are basically available in any flavor of Linux, no matter what Linux it is. Basically, these commands you'll always have. If you stick to those, then boom, you're fine. But there are a lot of functionalities that uh, are not included in the POSIX compatibility list that you would need. Sometimes you're just going to have to use something that's not POSIX compatible, and then you'll have to figure out either how to install it on that system or what kind of substitute you might be able to use to get that same effect. Um, so uh, you can rely on Bash in a lot of cases. You just have to be careful that Bash isn't necessarily all of the commands aren't POSIX compatible. So that means it's not going to necessarily work in every Linux system. I guess. Uh, I guess Windows probably has less of that. Um,
Well,
where
when it comes to Windows PowerShell, And again, I want to for our audience out there, when we talk about Linux applications, right? These are these are all still primarily command line applications, right? So um, one of the clearest examples I can think of is like Vim, right? Vim is a text editor, right? But there's also Nano, and they do the same functions, but they don't have the same feature set, right? Nano's a little bit lighter weight, it's newer. Vim and Vi, like some guys just kind of rely on those, and that they have other features that they're looking for. Some other examples of Linux applications, awk. Awk is a application, so it really just gives you access to a list of commands that perform a function, right? It's a little bit different from Windows, where if I want to launch Word, I have to like click Microsoft Word and a new program opens and I do everything inside of Word, right? Or I want to open up Adobe and then Adobe opens up. This is more or less giving you access to commands, and sometimes you have to execute them. We see that with applications that are built into Kali Linux.
Mhm.
But the closest example I can give in PowerShell is, you have everyone has PowerShell on their Windows machines, and you can do certain functions. But like if you wanted to use the Active Directory users and computers module, like you have to load that module. Otherwise, commands that you're going to try and do like get 80 users is just not going to work, right? So in that perspective, it functions how, again, Microsoft has been trying to kind of get back to providing this command line interface, and that's like the most Linux-like thing that I've seen is if you don't have the right modules loaded, the commands, even though the command is correct, your system's not going to recognize it because the module's not installed, the application's not installed for those commands to work.
Okay. Um, I guess I can share my screen here. See
Now,
if
you shared a link with us earlier. Can you tell us about that link you shared?
Yeah, so we got the onlinegdb.com. It's just I guess if I can share my screen, I can pull it up. Okay. Let's see. Let's just do that. So yeah, it's a website where you can play around with creating your bash scripts. You can uh, use this and run your commands here. Basically, you're writing out a script here, and then you can execute it. Um, so it's a way that if you want to kind of play around with a few of the commands. Unfortunately, you can't install commands. So if it's basically if it's not one of the commands that it actually has installed, then unfortunately not going to be able to experiment with it. Or at least I wasn't able to find a way to install stuff. Um, it doesn't have sudo, which gives you admin privilege.
Probably for good
So
reason.
right. I mean, yeah. Yeah, this is probably not a system that they want to give admin privilege to. Go in and wreck all their stuff. So unfortunately, you can't install stuff, but it does have a lot of commands available. So it is a good way to play around with that. If
What
you
is an
want.
what is an IDE?
IDE is an interactive development environment. Basically, it's an application like a text pad, but one geared towards coding. So it can do a lot to help you code. Nowadays, they come with AI agents that you can describe what you'd like to code, and it'll auto code some of it for you. It might do a shitty job, though, so be careful of that. Um, it'll give you nice coloration, like I think this one, yeah. Here, the echo is a little bit different color. Um, uh, and you can usually hop around. I can actually share do that.
So that is that how different is that from like Notepad plus plus? Right? Is it about the
Notepad
same?
plus plus. I've used Notepad as an IDE. It's just the
Basic.
feature sets are going to be much more limited. Um, oh, I was sharing my whole screen. That's all right. So I don't know what this script is. Hope it's nothing too terrible. um,
So VB is a Visual Basic Studio. Is that an IDE as well?
yeah, this is a Microsoft VS Code. Uh, so here, a lot of the times you can, unlike TextPad, um, like if I had a real um, code file, actually, this it's not saved. Um, uh, I think this is just from something random. Uh, like you can have like keywords in here, um, and you can hover over them. It'll give you extra information about it. Oftentimes, you can click on a lot of what the function names really, and it'll take you to the original definition of that either variable or function or whatever. So there's a lot of extra functionality that you won't get with Notepad. Um, so generally, those kind of functionalities are regarded as a bare minimum now. So a lot of people wouldn't really consider TextPad to be a worthy of being called an IDE. It's just a text editor. I have used it as an IDE, but yeah, it lacks all of the, well, not all of them, but most of the essential features that most devs would be looking for in an IDE. Um,
And PowerShell has so in addition to regular PowerShell, they do also provide PowerShell ISE, which
mhm,
is integrated scripting environment. So um, a lot of the same functionality you have, like the code lines, and it does some features like auto filling commands, and you can highlight certain parts of the code that you want to test and run.
mhm.
But it 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 does it literally just runs as it runs on your machine, right? So I don't know if it doesn't it's you have some switches where you can do what if, like some command line PowerShell commands support what if, and it would tell you what it would do
Mhm.
if it were to do it. But otherwise, you're running that thing straight. So you got to be careful, even when you're using ISC to kind of test and trial run things. It whatever you put in the ISC is going to launch and run as you put it in. So
That would be the same with code in an IDE. If you try to
mhm,
run it and test it, it's running stuff for real. Um, so often, what we do is to
test
have
and
it
prod, baby.
execute. Well, we generally will, if we don't want to really make any changes, we'll set up a virtual environment for it to run in, either a Docker container or an actual virtual machine. Um, Python has built-in virtualization um, that is common to the Python workflow. So you always get kind of your own environment for each application for Python. You could do that with other languages as well. It's just not the kind of tradition that's built in with most other languages. But yeah, if generally you're okay with wrecking your own machine, so most coders will just go ahead and let it run on their own machine, unless it's hard. It has code that reaches out to real servers, a real database, something like that. If you have something like that, then you definitely run it in sort of virtual mode where you're going to replace the address of that database with some sort of dummy database. Might not even be a real database. It's just something that always returns okay or whatever. Um, uh, so yeah, it's the same thing with code in an IDE. It's really going to run it if you try to test it. So yeah, the solution for that is just make sure it's either make sure that it's either in a virtual environment and that you have all external connections uh, dummied out. So yeah, you have to kind of be careful when you're testing your code. All right, so yeah, we have my little WSL uh, prompt here. Um, I guess just to go through some of the kind of common commands that you would kind of use. I can go through some of my day to day, and then I can cover some of what I know about cybersecurity usage. Although, like I said, it's not really my forte. I don't do it day to day. So ls is going to be one of your bread and butter commands. You're going to list all your files. Changing directory is
The screen not sharing.
not. Um, maybe I think the host might have to do something. It's telling me I'm sharing. Oh wait,
Go ahead and stop sharing and share again. I'll see the prompt.
See that?
Yep.
All right. So yeah, my WSL here. One of the big reasons that you would need Linux in a security context, though, is because often what you're doing is getting remote access into various machines, usually cloud resources. Um, and generally, one of the main ways you're going to do that is with SSH. I believe that's already been covered in a previous Cypher. Um, but yeah, you're generally going to be using SSH to get access into these other boxes. And once you've gotten SSH access, your interface is going to be generally uh, kind of Linux shell based. Generally Bash, but sometimes not. There are about three other common shells that you would encounter. Sometimes, like I said, if it's a really compact distribution of Linux, you'll only have the original Bourne shell, which is very limited. Um, a lot of the Macintosh, if you're remoting into someone else's laptop, the Macs generally use Z shell. And then one of the other ones that I've encountered is which one was it? Not T shell. There's another one that I've run into from time to time. Usually Bash is going to be available though. Most people use Ubuntu or something where Bash is going to be available. So yeah, that's probably one of the main reasons that you want familiarity with Linux, in almost any role, because anytime you're dealing with remote resources, you're often using SSH. There are other tools like was mentioned earlier with CrowdStrike, being able to remote in, or Windows has that built-in remote access
RDP,
tool. Yeah, RDP.
the remote
And
desktop protocol.
Yeah, and then you've got tools like were mentioned to log me in. So there are other ways, but oftentimes, especially with cloud resources, you're going to be using Linux. So you definitely want to be familiar with how to get around in Linux. Um, it, recruiters at HR departments, and when you're in an interview with the actual engineers and technicians, um, they are going to want to hear that you're comfortable with Linux in a lot of cases. Unless you're in a strictly Microsoft shop, which there are a fair number of. Um, Generally, when you're in an interview, uh, having a comfort level with Linux and being able to speak competently about the various commands that you would use in a sort of day to day kind of situation, that is going to definitely put you above someone who's been avoiding Linux or whatever. So
But
anyway,
but
mhm,
I,
yeah.
I I just want to I just want to show off how good of a people person I am. I mean, they said I didn't have to learn anything technical. Why would I? Why would I be learning all these Linux commands when I can just tell people how good I am as a collaborator and show off all of the soft skills and get the job?
The soft skills, they definitely will help you in certain levels of the interview. Um, a lot of these companies these days in IT, they love these multi-staged interviews with different representatives. There's usually going to be two people that you'll talk to. They might end up on the same call, but usually you'll end up talking to them a little separately. Sometimes they do a panel, but often it'll be separate. One person will come on, and then another person will come on. But yeah, you generally get the technical interview. Usually that'll come first. If you don't know the technologies, then there's no need to continue. So um, generally, there will be a person that will grill you on most of these interviews. Um, Generally, they'll do it in a friendly sort of way. A lot of them actually these days they give you a kind of test even up front, where hey, before you can even schedule the interview, go ahead and knock out this small little project or whatever, and give us the results, and then we can consider moving you along in the process. So in order, a lot of cases, and even to get to the place where you're displaying those soft skills, you already have had to do some technical work. So in almost all cases that I can remember, evaluation of soft skills came at the very end of the interview process. That was kind of the last kind of stop. And usually with a manager level type of person, a product owner, or the actual team manager, or some sort of department head. Just then, once they're comfortable with your technical knowledge, they want to see, your communication skills, how you resolve those sorts of difficult interpersonal situations. So, yeah, definitely you need the soft skills. But before you can even get to showing those off, often you will have to show off the technical knowledge. And Linux is one of those almost universal skills, which is kind of rare in IT. Often for each specialization, whether it's network engineering, cloud engineering, cybersecurity, coding, uh, there's kind of silos of skills that don't really have a whole lot of crossover. But Linux is one of those rare skills that pretty much runs the gamut for almost all IT specializations, except stuff like front end design. You may not ever need to deal with Linux. Um, Aside from that, um, pretty much, yeah. If you're doing almost anything else, or product management, you may not have to, or something like that. But yeah, if you're doing technical work aside from front end design, then you're probably going to need Linux. So that's why I kind of was excited that we get to kind of cover Bash because yeah, this is going to be critical. So let's get into a couple more commands here. We got a few more minutes before we need to wrap up. Um, so if you're um, searching logs is a big one, especially as far as cybersecurity focus. One of your big commands is going to be grep. Um, you want to search through a whole bunch of files and find some sort of keyword, um, whether that might be a timestamp, like you noticed there was an intrusion on certain day at maybe 12 o'clock. Then you can start searching through logs um, for maybe that timestamp. A lot of logs are formatted in I forget what the name of that format is, but it'll have a timestamp, and then it'll have your log information. Let's see if we got some logs we can play around with. D package sounds good.
Yeah, this is going to be super useful when it comes down to um like the biggest uh benefit I see is when you're going through like web proxy servers, right? Um, every time someone goes somewhere on the network, every time someone does something on the network, it's uh it's going to leave a note like source destination IP went here this time, and you may only care about IP addresses that you want to look for, right? There maybe there's a specific IP that you want to track, but your web server has like 20,000 lines of just entries that happen on that network. So being able to narrow down, like I only want to see um, log entries from this IP address, or maybe log entries for this specific port. I only want to see SSH ports, so I want to look at port 22. Um,
Mhm.
and being able to,
All right.
filter that out and find what you're looking for, as opposed to going through thousands and thousands and thousands of entries, is super critical.
Exactly. So yeah, grep is one of the most common tools that you use in Linux when you're looking for something. So there's also a couple of other tools. Um, awk was mentioned before. That's often used as well. Find is commonly used, but that's one of those commands that won't always be available. You might have to install it. Sometimes I believe I've had to do that. So grep, that's a big one you're gonna want, especially if you're doing some sort of investigation. You're going, especially if you're going through logs, like was mentioned. You're gonna have 20 billion lines. You want to filter through to specific pieces of information, whether it's the ports, whether it's a day, whether it's both. Like here, I I've got to say these lines, but maybe this isn't still too much. You can pretend that this was maybe 10,000 lines, and I can grep it again, um, and I could only look for the installs. Maybe we're looking if someone installed some malicious, uh, some sort of malware or something. So now we've filtered this all down to only the lines that mention install. Um, actually, put a space there and then get all of these that are only the install commands. So grep is super handy. It's going to be one of your top tools. Speaking of top, it's another one that you'll often be using. Like this was the one that helped us identify the crypto miner. Like what in the hell? Why is the database so slow? Oh, it's not getting any CPU because this crypto miner is taking up 100% of the CPU.
All about that crypto.
So top is a good one. This one shows you your your CPU and memory resource usage, and which applications are consuming. It's the same thing that you get in Windows with the process monitor or whatever it is. When you hit Control Alt Delete, and you can open up that process monitor screen. So this is going to show you whatever's using up CPU and memory. Right now, I don't really have anything running that would use up anything. Um,
What about historical stuff, right? So, if I wanted to see, everything seems to work normally, but then for some reason at 3 o'clock every Tuesday, the system goes to a crawl. What could you look at in Linux to see, this is a specific time window I'm looking for to see what's happening on the PC at this time?
um, I don't know of any standard tools that are guaranteed to be able to rewind your investigation to a specific time. You can hope that there are logs that are being generated. But one thing about Top is you can capture snapshots. You can run this. Um, there is a way to run this um, in a cycle. I think it's this D every 10 seconds or whatever. Oh,
Oh,
you want to print it. There's a way to do it. I forget how to do it. But yeah, you can just get a snapshot every 10 seconds and then log it. If you're having that problem with a machine, that's probably what I would do. I would take a snapshot every maybe 2 seconds, maybe, um, and then log that, and then delete it after about 48 hours. It's going to generate a lot of logs. Um, you might actually have to ship them off every few minutes to a log server because it's going to be a lot. Um, Actually, logging is one of the ways that you can wreck boxes in Linux. I have, especially, I've had that issue with AWS using the free tier. It's a very small server that you're given with not very much space. So after you install all of your tools and you set up like a website on that box and you have a database and all of this stuff running on this box, you almost have very little disk space left. And I've had websites that end up crashing just because it runs out of disk space, and then the database can't write anything new. And then you go in and you see that logs have taken up all the space. So you do have to be careful about how often you're logging and what you're doing with those logs. Nowadays, though, there are log shippers. Um, what is the common one? Not cron D. Uh, there's a really common one that works with a lot of logging programs. Let me look it up.
yeah. My experience has been going through the Cisco Network Academy. There
Mm.
was there is a function in Cisco that helps with troubleshooting, and it is the debug command. But they tell you explicitly, never, ever, ever run debug on a production environment. It will bring the device down trying to
Oh,
process.
with all the logs and everything.
It'll verbosely, which means like just
Yeah.
give as much data as possible as things are happening. It will bring your router, your switch, whatever you're running it on, to a crawl, and it could crash it. So if it's consuming all these resources to, verbosely tell you everything's happening, guess what else is not going to be able to do? It's not going to be able to switch and move packets. So
Right.
as a last result, if you can't figure out why the hell your switch is not switching or your router breaking, yeah, you can use debug, but yeah, you got to be very mindful of the overhead that is taking to do the thing. So definitely got to know how logs affect your machine, any processing that it takes, and make sure there's enough resources to be able to do the job it was supposed to do. Otherwise, you'll have an outage. So definitely got to be mindful of those things.
Yeah,
Sounds like I need to get more than some people skills then.
you might have to.
Yeah.
You'll need them people skills when
I,
they call
I
you into
don't
the office and ask you what happened.
I don't
All
know
right.
I don't know anything about this logging stuff. Doesn't sound like a lot of people stuff.
Oh man, yeah, you got to brush up. So yeah, here's the command for if you did want to run top periodically and see what's running. So I can go ahead and start another window here. I'm not sure. Can you guys see this other window?
Yep.
Yep.
All right, let me get not that. Get an Ubuntu window going. So I could run, say, what's something that'll run for a while? wget google.com. That might not run long enough, but we'll try. Um, so yeah, you see my wgets now in here, and it's the top application taking up 0.4% of the CPU. So this is going to give you a continuous snapshot every 10 seconds. You can set it to 2 seconds, whatever. So yeah, if I had an issue like that where there's something weird going on sporadically, and I needed to try to catch what was running, I would start with something like this. Another command that's going to be stuff. Another one of your commands that's going to be common is VI. A lot of people dread using VI. It's definitely not your notepad. So um, let's see what files we got here we can play with. What's in this Ansible? A favorite file. Okay.
Yeah, my
Um,
experience with Vi has been learning to use it for the first time. Like, all right, I'm in Vi. All right, I'm done editing the file. Crap, how do I get out? Where's
yeah.
the X button? No.
Yeah, escape and all the common kind of idioms that we're used to nowadays didn't exist back then. They were still in an era of kind of inventing our conventions and our idioms with escape button and all of that. So yeah, uh, but Vi is going to be one of the most universally available text editors. So if there's a weird text file that you need to kind of look through. Using Vi would be one of your most kind of guaranteed ways to do it. There are other text editors that might be available, like was mentioned Nano. Nano's one. I believe Leaf is one. Pine is one. Nano is probably the most easy to use one if it's available. Which okay, so it happens to be available here. Um, so yeah, you kind of got your commands just laid out right here. Control X to exit. So it's a good bit easier to use than VI, but uh, Nano's not necessarily available on many machines. So it helps to know VI. So don't be scared of Vim VI. Um, some people I know are like crazy expert with it. Uh, they can manage all of their Linux work without even using the mouse. They're just flipping back and forth between different windows and VI and everything, and they know all the shortcuts. I don't know like all the shortcuts. I know enough to get me through. I can do my searches. Uh, and my edits, save the file, exit, whatever. But yeah, so there's not a whole lot you need to learn in VI, but don't be scared don't let it intimidate you. It is a very primitive text editor, but it is good to know it.
So, and I wanted to with that you said something that kind of brought something up in mind. There's this technique called LOL, right, in the security world. It's a MITRE framework, and it's basically it stands for living off the land. So the more versatile you are with the multiple programs in Linux, the more functionality, the more tools that you have as a pen tester to take advantage of what programs are installed, right?
Mhm.
So, you maybe you've logged in on a machine that doesn't have Nano, and maybe Nano is the one that you use, right? But you want to be able to edit config files. You're gonna raise some flags if you try and download Nano, right? Someone's gonna see, like, why the hell is this machine downloading Nano? Like, who approved this change, right?
Yeah,
So
right.
you instead, in order to like hide under the radar and kind of hide what you're doing, you would just use what's available. So that's one technique that is used by a lot of attackers. Netcat is the same way, right? Netcat is super basic. Does file transfers, and uh, its power is in its simplicity. And I've seen where you've created complicated um, relays where I'm gonna use a pivot host. I'm gonna run a netcat command, and I will push commands from my outside machine to this inside machine that I have as my pivot host to hit the web server that I want to hit. Right. So if you think about, there's three computers: my computer on the outside, there's a computer on the inside that I have compromised, but I want to get to a web server. The web server is only accessible from the compromised host, right? How can I, from the outside, run commands? Um, you can use Netcat, right? So if Netcat is on that thing, it's not designed for that, but it can be
Mhm.
repurposed for that. So learning how to utilize tools that's available to you without having to push your software toolkit that you know of makes you a much more effective uh, red teamer, right? And that's just one of those skills that you're going to want to have. So the more familiar you are with a lot of Linux programs, a lot of the basics tools, like, you just give more opportunities to kind of use what you got, so you don't have to trip alarms by trying to deploy a Docker version of some application you're trying to run in memory, right?
Right. So yeah, that's another great point. Knowing the tools that may be available where you can avoid installing anything definitely has its advantages. So um, yeah, great. Um, I guess one of the other big things about Linux that used to not be a big thing about Windows, and a lot of home Windows users still haven't gotten into, is file permissioning. Um, there is a concept of file permissioning now in Windows, but for the longest, they didn't really have one. Um, but all the files in Linux come with a set of permissions. You can look at those permissions by using this list command with the LA parameters. So you're going to have a block of permissions. The first three are going to be for the owner of the file, which in this case is a user named Winix. The next three are, wait, I'm sorry. This first one is something different.
That the
Uh,
first one is the file
next,
type.
yeah,
So if it's a
um,
regular file or it's a directory.
right. So the next three are going to be your users, the owner of the file's permissions. The next three are going to be the group, which also is a group called Winix. And then the last three are the basically public
For
permissions,
everyone else, yeah.
yeah, for everyone. Um, so oftentimes you will need to manipulate these permissions. One of the big times is so there's a command called touch, which basically will update a file file's last modified date. Um, or if it doesn't exist, it will create it. And so I don't have a file here called test script or test.sh shell. SH is going to be the usual extension for a shell script. But if I do touch, then that will create a test.sh file. These are the permissions. And then we can go ahead and put some content into this file. Say we just want to see what the processes are, and we want to echo hello world, and that's basically it. And then if we try to run this, it's going to give us permission denied. Why is that? It's because we have a blank here in the execute permission. So there is no permission to execute this file. So the command that you can use to modify the permissions is called chmod, chmod. And here we want to give the owner of the file, the user, we want to add the execute permission on this test.sh file. And that will then modify that permission and give us this X. We could give it to
Can you give
everyone.
us a couple of enters so we can see it? It's hiding behind your name. There you go.
So we get this little X. So that means that now the user, the owner, has permission to execute the file. So now that we can run this script. And it's going to run the process list. So these are all of the applications running on my system at the time. And then it will echo hello world. So yeah, when you're creating shell scripts, this is a common use case where you'll need to modify the permission because by default, they generally will not come with the execute permission. So you'll want to add that, and so you can actually run your script. So that's another big one. And then we also covered touch in there as well. And a couple more that I wanted to make sure. Actually, while we're on the topic of permissions, go ahead and cover change group. Let's see what my groups actually are. So I'm a member of all of these groups.
And this is good enumeration skills, right? You've got the user's password, you cracked into the box. What can you do? What
Right.
permissions do you have? Who has the permission to do what you want to do? I mean, you're not always going to jump into a box and the user has root access or sudo access, right? So you got to find out, okay, well, which user does, and is there another group I can kind of pivot in that I will be able to get access to the file I want to get access to, right?
Right. So there is a command you can run to get the list of users. Cat.user bin. What?
Uh-oh.
User. I forget what it is. Hold on. I'm gonna have to look it up.
And that's real life, right? You're not always gonna know the things off the top of your head. I'm not ashamed to say I've used Chat GPT, Copilot to kind of find what I want to do. X, what's the thing called? How do I do the thing? Um, some
Yeah.
results are some results are better than others, but yeah, there's a lot of enumeration there. You gotta, where are you in the directory? What are your permissions? Who has permissions? What files are out there? You want like these are the kind of things. If you want to get into pen testing, you're gonna want to know how to find interesting stuff, where to identify interesting stuff, what directories that they're in, um, and how do I get there? Is it an executable file? Do I have execute permissions? Who does?
Right.
Where are the usernames and the password hash is stored? It's and plot twist. it's not the PASSWD file unless it's a really old distribution of Linux, right? That's all in the shadow file. So you got to find out who has access to the shadow file. So
Mhm.
there's a whole world out there as far as Linux, and for those who are interested in pen testing, you're gonna want to get brushed up and get as much proficiency in Linux as you can because all the best tools are on Linux. Um, uh,
Yeah.
so before we close, um, for users out there that are like, man, I wish I could learn how to use Linux, but where do I go? How do I start? I've heard some advice out there like just install Linux and go for it. And it's like everyone kind of wants to jump to Kali Linux, and it's like, well, you could, but there's a lot of advanced functionality in there. You might want to just go with an easier distribution,
Mhm.
like Debian or something or Ubuntu, and just start kind of going from there. And the biggest challenge I had was, okay, I got a Linux laptop. What do I do? What do I feel like doing? I mean, we're so smartphone oriented now as a society. It's like, what the hell do I do on a laptop now outside of like gaming? And Linux sucks for gaming. So like, what do I do? What are your suggestions on?
Um, Most of the time when people ask me about how do I learn this thing, um, generally my go-to would be YouTube. There are going to be a million people who have put up tutorials on YouTube, and the first few hits are generally going to be decent, especially if it's one of the test prep courses. Those are the ones that probably have the highest production quality. So I would look, yeah, for some sort of Linux shell or Bash test prep, and then just walk through it. Yeah, you're going to have to go ahead and install Linux, but you won't just be wandering through yourself. You'll be following along and being able to learn that way. So that's probably my top recommendation. How about you, Lee?
Um, I mean, yeah, we already been using platforms like TrackMe and things, so they have Linux rooms. This is a good point in if you're like very, very new, like never even seen a Linux terminal before type of new. This is where those things like those CompTIA certs like Linux Plus may come in handy to have a structured learning path on different things that's available. And once you get a basic familiarity, then you can download an ISO file on your laptop for a VM. They make it real easy now, so it doesn't take a lot of resources to run a Linux distribution of your choosing. To just now, once you got a basic understanding from your certification course or your tracking you're on YouTube, now you can start doing it hands-on, and then come across different things that you didn't know was there. And then you can start Googling, okay, now since I got basic understanding, I got my virtual machine, what can I do with this? And Googling some projects that other people may have done, trying to emulate those. I was like, okay, I see how they did this, or where this can be improved at, make your own spin-off version of it. And then once you do that, then you get a pretty good foundation. Then you can build your own project that you come up with after doing a walkthrough of a project. Do your own project, and then now at that point you can say you've built something, you've done something to address a certain problem, or just having fun with it to actually be able to explain when they say, "Hey, what's your experience with Linux?" You got a great answer. You got more than just I watched YouTube. I got more than just a cert. You actually have now hands-on experience with whatever you built, and you can talk about it in greater detail than if you was just reading about it or just having a certification, right? So I think that's like a good path to go down, and it doesn't take long. I know people probably look at this like it takes a long time, but you could probably do all of that within like 2 months, maybe, or probably
Oh,
less. Dedicate
yeah.
an hour
I
on it.
do. I do want to re-emphasize something you just said, though. Oh my God, I did not mention that at all. Is to run if you're going to experiment with Linux, run it in a virtual machine. Um,
Yes.
one thing about Linux is
It gives no
It,
fucks.
it won't. It won't. It'll let you destroy everything without a whole lot of fuss. So people have deleted their entire system file, everything. They've deleted all documents on their system, everything. People have. I I personally have used the a command wrong and just switched around two parts of the command, and it completely wrecked my whole disk drive. It was the DD command. I was trying to back up one disk drive to a blank, but I had it backwards, so I backed up the blank to the one I wanted to save, and it just erased the one I wanted to save with blankness. So you do want to use a virtual machine if you're going to experiment with Linux, because there are not a lot of safeguards like there are in Windows. Windows often won't even let you do dangerous things. You can't delete sys32. So Windows,
A lot of safeguards.
yeah, have a lot of safeguards. Linux has very few. It might ask you, "Are you sure?" But even that's not guaranteed. Uh,
Yeah, be like, oh, you want to overwrite this file? All right, done. Like, whoa, whoa. It's like, hey, this file already exists. You sure you want to overwrite it? Like, no, no. Linux is like, all right, you told me to do it. I did it. And I did it
right,
quickly,
right. Before
expeditiously, even.
you try to cancel it, it's like, oh no, we're done.
No, we're done. Move on to the next thing you want to break.
Right. So yeah, that is a great point, Lee. Make sure you're practicing in a virtual machine, because there are certain commands that are very easy to really destroy a lot of things. That's why one of the reasons when you see me typing some of this stuff, like this dot slash test, I could just do test and get the same result. Um, what? Well, maybe not. Um, in a lot of cases, though, you can just type just the command without this sort of directory indicator. But just from the dangers of a lot of the commands, especially like delete, remove, RM, I've gotten into a habit of putting the dot just in case, because I'm sure I've had it in the past before where I hit enter on accident too fast before I'd gotten to finish typing out a name, and it just started deleting the whole system. So if you put the dot, though, at least you're only deleting the files in your current directory and the subdirectories. At least you're not going to lose your whole system. Um, so
So my,
yeah, you kind of have to develop habits just to guard against even accidents.
or your Linux career will be short.
Right? Um, Backups, definitely do that. But yeah, just one of the things about Linux, just be careful. You can destroy a lot of things without a lot of safeguards. So I think that'll kind of do it for us. But yeah, just the overall message is don't shy away from Linux. It's universally useful in almost all fields of IT. So if you take it on, it's not going to be a wasted skill for most people. So yeah, dive into it. It's a little bit different from Windows, so just play with it a little safely.
Yep.
Yep. I like Try Hack Me because it gives you those guided tutorials, and
Mhm.
because your projects are security focused, like, okay, we want to take the hash, right? Um, it'll kind of tell you where to go. Once you've kind of done those rooms and you've got a good familiarization, you can move over to things like Hack the Box and do like some capture the flag events that don't hold your hand. You can really test what you really know. So there are tons of tools out there. We talk about we provide resources and advice and at Black IT Academy for those who want to take a look at what we provide. That's not the page I wanted to show. Our QR code is right there in the lower left corner. That'll get you our link tree where you can see all of our places where we exist: YouTube, um, Twitch, Discord. Um, really appreciate you guys coming in and hanging out with us. Uh, I'm trying to think of something clever to sign off with, but this has been another episode about that cipher. We hope to see you next time.
Yep. See ya.
See ya.